Pleasure to speak with all of you. I'm so excited. I have so many ideas in my head. So I'm hopefully we can have one or two things that you learn from my experience that can save you some brain power to make your journey a little bit easier. So yeah, quick about me. I explain technology things in my day job, and I've done that in a few different contexts for software training. Currently working in cybersecurity. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and kind of on a personal level, I love the dairy-free ice cream at Clementine's Creamery. Highly recommend if you're ever in the neighborhood. Why should you listen to me? I've been diagnosed with uveitis for quite a few years. We'll leave it at that. And I've seen doctors. I was realizing on my own medical resume of like my experience, I've seen doctors at five different academic teaching hospitals since I was diagnosed early on in college. And on the positive side, thanks to the end result of the work done by the folks here at the foundation, I still have beautiful 20/20 vision. So on my own personal management, I manage my uveitis with a biologic Cimzia. My eyes are overachievers when it comes to inflammation. And then I also do the best I can with healthy diet, lifestyle. Gluten-free seems to work for me, but that's always subject to potential revision, and managing stress is helpful. Like we mentioned, what I'm sharing here today is what works for me. Hopefully, some ideas might be inspirational for you. Not necessarily saying what I do is the right answer. There's lots of different things that ways you could approach this, and definitely nothing I'm sharing is medical advice. So, in general, things on our offering today that we'll have for points of discussion. Who's on your team? Ways I think about advocating for myself in an appointment. Lots of details for creating medical documentation. A little bit of a specialty medication pep talk that I wish I heard for my first prescription, and how to create options for creating some calendar and reminder systems. So yeah, as we have questions, feel free to post them in the chat throughout, and then I'll save some time at the end for interactive Q&A. And yeah, on the biologic front, I mean, that's the way to go backwards. Yeah, I'm currently well managed with Cimzia. That's the biologic that I'm using. This is to keep me honest. I do have a link for you. So do not feel pressured unless you'd like to take notes throughout. I've got everything downloadable here. You can download the full contents of my slides. I'll be talking about a couple different inspirations for templates. I've got that all ready for you to download, and we'll share that again a little bit later in the presentation. This is a cheesy productivity quote, but this is kind of how I think about a lot of things in my life. The times that we need to do the most things with our managing chronic illness, at least in my experience, is when I feel the worst and have the least capacity to do that. So you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So that's a quote from James Clear. The things I like about this is my whole thought process is how can I use technology, systems, external reminders, even if it's on a piece of paper, so I don't have to spend my brain power remembering to do the many, many, many tasks I need to keep my eyeballs functioning. So I'm going to rapid fire some ideas here kind of at the front of the presentation so that we have some more time to talk through the technology systems at the end. So who's on your team? Think about your support system and your providers. So on a personal level, I have lots of trusted friends and family members who sometimes need to drive me to appointments, have your sounding board. Helping having someone join you to take notes is really helpful. Think about your emotional support. I'm really lucky to have supportive colleagues at work that if I need accommodations for certain things, they're helpful to say like, hey, we need XYZ ahead of time. Like even a written agenda can sometimes be helpful. And then you all are here at the Uveitis support group, which is a great step too. Now, think about your medical team. There are great additional support group topics that are programmed for this year about kind of finding the right medical support, but finding the most qualified person you can access in your area or even potentially traveling with uveitis specific support is helpful. So I work with both an ophthalmologist who has expertise in uveitis, and I have a rheumatologist that prescribes the biologic for me. And make friends with your team's support staff. So make sure you understand how they communicate. Who is your person? I have Ashley the Wonderful as my rheumatologist support staff person, and I message her on the regular for getting support for specialty medication access. One of the most stressful things early on in my journey was I have a flare. How do I get in to see someone? So, my recommendations for that are call the office, be specific. Don't be afraid of being really clear with the people on the phone. Explain your history of uveitis. This feels the same as when I've had that in the past. Ask if they have any emergency appointments set aside to be seen sooner. If they say no, politely ask follow-up questions. Can I speak with a nurse or a medical team member who has some more contacts? Remind them that waiting to see a doctor potentially has impacts for your vision. Ask about a cancellation list. Is there someone else who could see you? And I would say my main takeaway you'll see as a theme with a lot of these points is be persistent. If you don't get a helpful answer the first time, call back. Don't hesitate about calling back to get the help that you need. Finding the right doctor. Your health is valuable. It is okay to ask hard questions. I had some less than helpful medical advice with some of my first flares, and it took me longer than it would have needed to get the help that I needed. And I didn't have the best interventions, which had some level of impact on my eyes. Not too bad long term, but would have been better if I had some other folks helping me. So don't hesitate to ask questions when you're I think of a first visit with a new doctor as an interview. What training have you completed? How often do you treat uveitis patients? Do you work with a rheumatologist? If they are only comfortable prescribing steroids, keep asking for more help if that's not working for you. My most helpful resource that I'm really grateful to have is I've been in multiple cities where they have a uveitis clinic. So what I do right now is twice a year I see my ophthalmologist. He takes a look at my eyes. Lately, thankfully, they've been quiet. The doctors talk behind my back. Then I have a second visit and copay for my rheumatologist who makes any like prescription changes that we would need. That's been super helpful for getting the best care for me. Keep in mind for referrals, if you're doing some of that, seeking additional opinions, a referral, if you call a doctor's office, they say, hey, you can't talk to XYZ new doctor until you have a referral. That requirement could come from a few different places. It could be coming from insurance, could be coming from the doctor's office. I was surprised to learn that there's only about 5,000 rheumatologists in the United States for a lot of people who need their help. So they often maintain that availability by needing to see a note from your primary care first. So your primary care is your advocate. So going back to my primary care is my main strategy. And then I'll work with the office staff at any other offices to transfer my records. This is one of, I think, my two favorite pro tips that I've learned the hard way. I find it really stressful if I need to be referred to a new type of doctor. I have something new going on. They say you need to see XYZ specialist. Could be as simple as like your first rheumatologist appointment. I find that to be a very stressful experience with medical anxiety. I find it really helpful to manage that because if you make that phone call, it may take you months to see a new provider. I'm anxious by the time that appointment arrives. It makes it even more stressful. I like to do the phone work ahead of time, make an appointment with person A, and also make an appointment with person B. Usually, in my case, I have a big enough geographic area. Those are often in two different offices, two different medical systems. If the first appointment goes well, great. No problem. Cancel the second appointment, no harm. If that first appointment doesn't get you the help you need, if you're not happy with the answers to some of those questions, you don't have to wait another 6 months for that second appointment. You have a built-in second opinion and you don't have to wait as long. That's been a helpful strategy for a few different things that I manage. So just for example, I needed to find a new primary care doctor because my old one was no longer practicing. So I made my phone calls in January. Provider 1, appointment April 1st. Provider 2, appointment June 12th. Provider 3, appointment in September. And I prepared a list of the same 3 questions for each of those providers. So even though I was asking over 6 different months, I had kind of 3 questions that gave me a feel for those providers and if helped me choose which one would be the best fit for me so I could kind of compare consistent information. Preparing to advocate for yourself in your appointment. A few different kind of points here. So first being, this is probably my other favorite pro tip. if you only remember one thing from this call today, I think this is the thing that has made the most improvement in my experience with the medical system, and it's writing down your appointment goal. It sounds really small, but I prep for a doctor appointment like I prep for a work meeting. And often these days, this is just a private note on my phone, and it just helps me understand that one thing I don't want to leave the office without having accomplished, because they're going to ask you questions, you'll think of new questions, and that way I don't leave neglecting my main goal. When I've had other my collection of chronic things, when I've had other new specialists I'm talking with, sometimes I have a really complex history to tell them, and occasionally I've sent a my chart message a week ahead of time and said, "Here's my main goal for the appointment. Here's the context you need to know about me, just so you know what we're planning to talk about today." Make a plan for managing that medical anxiety while you're waiting. This sound, if I heard myself saying this 10 years ago, I would say, Catherine, this is too woo. What are you talking about? But I found it really helpful looking online for nervous system regulation options. Do some Googling, you'll find a lot of things. Some of my favorites are having a favorite music playlist, humming, or I have danced in waiting rooms when no one is watching before. I find it really helpful. Some grounding practices can be simple as like literally just remember that you have bottoms to your feet. What do they feel like? Take some deep breaths while you're tracing the outline of your fingers. That's another favorite. Another sneaky one for during the appointment, it kind of depends on the office, but if you can bring a cold or hot drink to sip during a stressful conversation, that's helpful. And then anything to do with your hands. I like knitting, but fidget toys are great too. When I first had a doctor explain to me what my eyes were doing, they accurately described that as your body is attacking itself. Long term emotionally, I find that very unhelpful. So here's how I tweak that in my head today. My body is doing the best it can to protect me, even if she's maybe a little bit misinformed. And lately this year, my body is like an expensive BMW. To run well, she needs frequent service appointments with some expensive parts. So I find that helpful specifically because that helps motivate me to make the positive lifestyle changes that I know really help me feel better. Whereas my body attacking itself, I find that really demotivating personally. The hardest times for me, if I'm in a flare specifically, is thinking, what if it's like this forever? And so I know that's kind of a red flag when I see my brain doing that for getting some support from people around me. And when I hear that, I fortunately have enough experience now that I have a lot of real life experiences to point to that every single one of my flares has changed or gotten better to some extent. So chances are that will happen again. And I remind myself that I will keep seeking answers until I find something that helps. And that helps me kind of get through those really tough flare moments. And again, I would have said this sounds crazy woo, but I've actually found it really helpful to work through statements like that doing emotional freedom technique. There's a YouTube that's linked in the follow-up resources called Tap with Brad. You can find a Tap with Brad for everything. It sounds crazy, but I can feel my body just like relax a little bit. And if I'm in something like a stressful appointment or just even on a daily basis, that helps take the edge off. So prepping for your appointment, now that we have some stress management skills, I practice your elevator pitch. And yes, I mean, say it out loud ahead of time to a friend, family member, or to a mirror. What really helped me with this is picture your doctor's shoes. We all have like hard days at work. They may have 10 minutes to see you and be hungry for lunch. So practicing your elevator pitch helps you get the best care and by giving your doctor the relevant information that they need. And studies have shown that you're lucky to get 60 minutes explaining your questions to your doctor initially before they ask some follow-up questions. So I would focus on your timeline, either how it started or if this is someone you're coming back to, changes since your last visit. If there's any pain in your picture, the most helpful thing to focus on for your language is speaking in terms of function. So how is this impacting my daily life? What have you tried already? And end with a clear kind of point and request. And I'm anxious in appointments. So practicing this helps me make sure that I'm really having a nice, clear request. And then prioritize your questions. So I probably have 10 different questions that I want to ask in some of these appointments, but having that goal and number one question you want to ask helps make sure that you leave the appointment actually accomplishing that goal. And then maybe you have some, depending on what they say for that one question, maybe you have some follow-up questions that you might want to ask, and then some like nice to ask if there's time. Always leave with a next step as you're ending one of those appointments. So if you get a test, ask for a copy of the records before you leave. So I've needed to get, less so for my eyes, more so for other things. I've had to get imaging like x-rays or CAT scans done before. It is the easiest time to get a copy of those records right then. Sometimes if you ask them nicely, they can give you a like physical copy of a CD even before you leave. Sometimes no, but that's the easiest time to at least ask about getting those records rather than trying to write in and sign paperwork later. Always either schedule the next appointment or spoiler alert for our reminders. If I can't schedule an appointment at whatever that time is, set a time in your calendar to remind yourself to call back the doctor's office. You don't have to remember. And for referrals, often the doctor will say, well, I want you to see the rheumatologist, for instance, and the doctor's office needs some time to send paperwork. Confirm all the details. Who is going to send it? Where are they sending it? When can I expect a next step? And again, put that on your calendar. Doctor's offices are busy. Despite best intentions, that may not happen. And I'm not going to wait 2 weeks to like see if it happens. I'm going to be calling back if it should be there in 48 hours. And that keeps the system moving. Now for the important part here, creating your medical history documentation. This is something that I have found really, really helps my communicate my complex medical history effectively, both to existing providers, but even more so to new ones. And then from there, I'll share some options for kind of more advanced reminders and calendars. So why keep your medical history for yourself when often we have computer systems at the doctor to do that for us? It's more legible to read. As much as the information, I go to doctors mostly in the same system. It's probably technically all in the computer, but my quick overview is kind of like I kind of think of it as like my medical resume. It's a clear sheet of paper. We can both physically hold it and look at it if I print it off to take it to the appointment. I personally hate when people cannot pronounce my medication names. I don't want to say them out loud. I don't want to listen to you try to say them out loud. Here's a physical record you can hand to the nurse if I'm having a real grumpy day. Here's my medication list. I'm not reading this to you. And coordinate care not only between your own specialists, but also when you're traveling. So I use this document when I was interviewing primary cares. I have a lot going on. This having it written out in an organized way helps me give someone a tour of my medical history. I don't have to write things on a piece of paper that they can't read anyway, because my handwriting is less than ideal. And it saves me time for all of that paperwork. If they're giving me paperwork for anything that's on my medical paper, I just say, see attached, see attached, see attached. And they're so happy to read it in a nice, clear way. Also, real life story when the first time I got COVID, I was traveling, of course. So I'm immunocompromised. I've got a lot going on. I was able to print this document, give it to my person I was visiting at urgent care, and was able to get much better care that way. If I'm traveling internationally, I just print a copy, put this in my suitcase. Hopefully, I never need it, but it's much better rather than having someone where you're struggling to communicate, especially if you're not feeling well. So I have the idea here. I just mainly want to talk about the idea. The details of how you keep this is going to be unique to you and what's actually practical for you to keep up to date. Maybe you have great handwriting and this is literally a handwritten copy. My preference is to have a locally saved document on my computer, and then I save that to my password manager. So that could be something like, for example, I've got options for you that are a Word file. I save that to my password manager that I know is nice and encrypted. Some people, for convenience, choose to save this in a cloud storage like Google Drive, for example. And in that case, just for security, you might consider password protecting that document and memorizing that password or writing it down in a secure place. And those template options that I mentioned are all, I've got lots of different ideas available for you in the link that I mentioned, and we'll share that a little bit later. So key info to include, I'll actually walk you through each of these pieces. To give you some context, mine requires about 4 pages. So I've got 2 pieces of paper front and back that I bring with me if I'm going to a medical appointment to support my conversation. So I have kind of the personal details section up front. So I've got my name, the date I updated this file. If I'm going kind of prepping for an important appointment, I'll take a look through all of these details and change anything that needs to be updated. So that would be like my date of birth, cell phone number, address. Got some made up providers here, but they're always asking who your primary care is. And then if you have more, I have 3 different pharmacies that I use for different things. Write down anything that's relevant. Current medications. My list is actually much longer than this. This is all kind of made up information, but it's helpful to have the name of anything that you're taking, what the dose is, how often you take it, what it's prescribed for, and what medical professional is doing the prescribing. I have a section for as needed medications I just take sometimes, may or may not be relevant for you. And if there's any medication allergies, make sure you're noting that. So that way, if you have a conversation, you can just hand this to someone and they can really effectively see what you're currently taking. If you take supplements, make sure to manage those as kind of include those as well, because that's relevant data. Same idea. Surgeries and procedures. I hate writing all of this out, and I can't remember years very easily. So have a list of anything that's happened to your body. Have one nice place to list it out as far as like procedures, family history, anything that is relevant there, and the relative that had it. I kind of have 2 columns in my format. And then this is what I find the most helpful, especially like for a new primary care appointment or my urgent care appointment. I have a list of all of my chronic or kind of history of things that have happened to me. So for each condition, I have something listed, who's currently treating it, how would you call that person for their phone number? And I've kind of given a formula here. It's going to depend on what's happened for you, but a brief kind of written out description of what has happened. When did it first happen? How were you diagnosed? List any major tests that have happened. Um, for instance, if you were on XYZ medication for 10 years and it worked great, then it stopped working and you switched to this, kind of a verbal description of what's happened. So this would be, kind of an example for potential kind of uveitis. Now, as I was first getting diagnosed with uveitis, trends over time was really important. And there's a few different ways I've tracked this. So if you're getting diagnosed with something, it's helpful to have a list of what's happening that's making you ask for medical care. So there's a few different ways you can think about that. In your document, I do mine in a spreadsheet. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend that for a new document. It can be a little bit tricky to maintain, but I have additional pages or additional tabs in my document where if I have something notable that happens and it's undiagnosed and I'm starting to see some themes that are changing, I'll start just a list, like a timeline of undiagnosed symptoms. And just, it doesn't need to be super specific necessarily, but anything that you think is relevant in order that you would want a doctor to know about if you had a real detailed discussion can just be helpful to list those out chronologically. Something else I track over time would be like a single blood test. So if there's something I want to see how it's changing as my hopefully gets better over time as I'm kind of looking at new treatments, I have a list of those. I have found it helpful to get blood tests at LabCorp. I always get my blood done there, and then their website actually lets you click on a test and see a graph with past results. And ask your doctor what it's helpful to track over time if there's something that they would want to keep an eye on. So options to track symptoms. One way that I do this is I have a specific calendar on my phone that I use to record important things that I might need to look back on. So in my case, my dedicated uveitis calendar is not shared with anyone else, but I use this to make a note to self anytime I start or stop a new medication. If I've needed eye drops in the past, thankfully don't need them now. But if I had one of those flare months where I'm doing XYZ eye drops 4 times a day on week one, 3 times a day on week two, I put that as an item in my calendar. So every day I don't have to remember what that schedule is. And if there's a really meaningful symptom change, like flare started January 1st, I put those in there. And then in addition to my like written out document, sometimes I just need to search if I stopped a medication that can come up years later in a doctor appointment, like when was the last time you took XYZ? And I can just search my calendar. Now, I also have a separate calendar on my phone that's shared with my family. So if I might need someone to drive me to a doctor visit for I'm getting my eyes dilated, or I have a team for helping me receive my medication shipments and get them to the right place and get them in the house safely, those things my family needs to see. So I have a calendar that I have taken the time to share with them so they can see that detail on their electronic calendar as well. My past experience is working with Apple devices, but this concept would transfer to Android, Google as well. So, one detail on Apple iPhones, if I want to search my past events, you have to go into your settings and say, I want to see all of the events on this calendar from 5 years ago on my phone. So in settings, you would go search for apps or just do a quick search for calendar. And towards the bottom, kind of hiding at the bottom of the page, is this sync option. And you want to change that to all events. So I've had conversations like prepping for a procedure where it's like, what was the last time you took this medication? I can just search for the medication name on my phone and I could say I took that until 2018 and it shows up. If you would like to create a dedicated folder or a dedicated calendar on your phone, I have my work calendar that's only for work things. I have my home calendar that's kind of for everything in my personal life. And I have a dedicated doctor appointments calendar that's shared with my family and a separate one that I use just for kind of my private symptom tracking. So inside of your calendar, any calendar system will give you a chance electronically to make a dedicated calendar. So in on iPhones, we're looking for a calendar shape or add calendar, and you can make a new calendar here. Just to give you an idea, I titled mine Uveitis. You can give it a fun name if you want. And we want to make sure that this is coming from an email provider. That might be iCloud, that might be Google, that might be Microsoft Exchange. This ensures that your data, if you have a phone and a computer or a phone and a tablet, that this data is synced between all of your devices. I don't share my symptoms one with my family, but for my like doctor appointment calendars, I could add my family members here so they can see anything that I put on the calendar. Or if you prefer, you can also invite your family to specific events just by adding specific people here. But this would be an example if I needed to take eye drops again. Hopefully that doesn't happen anytime soon. But this would be an example of how I would create an event on my uveitis calendar. I would say, Duracell eye drops 4 times a day, left eye. This is the date I'm starting. This is the date it's ending. Pay attention to which calendar this is going on so it doesn't go on your work calendar. And then if there's anything else I want to remember about this, there's always a notes field in the calendar. So I can make a note of like, how is this flare going? So like this is a suggestion from a past flare. No change on the first day. This got better on the second day with the medication. I had some scleritis going on, so I made sure I was like looking down when I took those eye drops. In my world, a calendar event is anything that happens at a date and time, but you can also combine this with a reminders app. Google kind of has this both in one place. Apple has a separate app called Reminders, and you can see things on your calendar with a little checkbox to check them off. So, reminders I find helpful for medication reminders because I get a kind of separate pop up on my phone, and this is going to show in the Reminders app until I check this off. And either calendar events or reminders can repeat on a schedule. My favorite thing with reminders, you can do this for calendar events as well, but reminders are a little bit less information. So you can ask, I'm going to say this slowly, so hopefully I don't trigger any devices. You can say the magic word for Siri, and then you can say a phrase like, remind me to take my medication every day at 9 a.m. or they can be location based. So remind me to take my medication when I leave work or when I leave home, things like that. And you can say, remind me every Monday at 9 a.m. to take my biologic, whatever that looks like. And then those reminders will appear and you don't have to remember as much on your phone. Watching my time here because I want to make sure we have some time for questions. So this is the pep talk I wish I could give to my 19-year-old self getting my first uveitis diagnosis for the whole kind of system, but like specialty medications in particular. So this is our family quote about anything medical system related. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan press on has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. Calvin Coolidge. It's a nerdy quote, but do not give up. Do not give up. The specialty medications, I could say a lot of things. I will try to be diplomatic here. Specialty medications have a list price of very expensive. Expect to hear no several times in the process. Do not give up. Keep asking for more information and for the next step. And find out who is your support system in your medical doctor's office, who handles these kind of specialty medication requests. They will have people that are familiar with this system. Learn how they like to communicate and keep asking for help. To give you an idea, when I changed jobs to the best insurance I have ever had, it took me 22 phone calls to get my specialty medication. Yes, I could have given up at scary message number 2, but continuing to be persistent is what will get you the care that you need. And I'm so sorry you have to do this. It should not have to be this way, but don't give up. Another context, for a period of time, the refrigerated biologic Cimzia boxes that were arriving at my house came with a piece of paper inside that says it costs $1,500. It did not cost $1,500. My pharmacy insures each package that arrives at my house for $6,000. How much money do I actually pay? $0. So if you see alarming information in this process, I have a design background. It's by design. They put up intentional hurdles to make it difficult to get this medication. Could there be times when it's just not possible? Yes, but do not give up. Don't take the first no for an answer because I've had many, many fights about this and I've always been successful in getting the care that I need in terms of specialty medication. This will be in our follow-up. I know we have some other resources coming and I want to make sure we have time for questions, but learn the people in the process. Your doctor is involved. Your doctor support staff is involved. Your insurance company gives you the authorization to fill the prescription. The specialty pharmacy actually sends you the medication. And my current insurance company requires me to talk to multiple parties to confirm that the drug manufacturer dollars that are intended for patients go to the insurance company. So there are 6 entities involved in me getting my medication. Keep asking questions and learn how your particular system works. So here are my monthly medication steps and figure out your system for reminders. This could be a notebook. This could be a paper calendar. This could be a combination of your favorite reminders or electronic calendar app. Totally up to you. But create reminders for these steps so you do not have to use your brain power to remember them because this is too much for any one human to keep track of. So here's my system, a kind of checklist for each month. I order medication from the pharmacy. I only schedule deliveries on Tuesday to Thursday in case there's a delay of my refrigerated shipment that gives me a buffer for Friday delivery. I add a date to my family calendar, so it's more than just me watching for this important package that arrives on our doorstep so it doesn't get stolen. I watch for shipment track notifications, and you can download the UPS or FedEx app so they'll have a better chance of sending you notifications for tracking. When the medication arrives, this is a very recent innovation that has made my life significantly easier. When the medication comes, mine comes in a box that I can write things on the outside of. My medication box that I take every 2 weeks. I write in Sharpie the date I got the medication. I always want to take the oldest medication that I have. And somewhere on the fine print of that prescription, I have always found a refill after date. This is the first date you're allowed to reorder. Note that in your calendar. So in my case, if I get a shipment on January 1st, I usually can refill my prescription like around the 21st. Don't wait till you run out of medication because I can only get a 1 month supply. So if I reorder every 3 weeks, that is my best case of making sure I always have medication on hand and just put it in the calendar so you don't have to remember. Then to take the medication, whether this is a physical note in your calendar or a calendar or reminder system, when that reminder pops up, figure out a method that works for you to physically record when you took the medication because I sometimes can't remember. So for me, in my calendar, I put a little check mark and the date I actually took it. I actually physically write on the box, taken on XYZ date. And then I put a little star on the corner of the box that I'm currently opening, that I currently have open because I have a couple in the fridge at this point. That way I'm always taking the oldest medication first. Last key part of this process is know when your prior authorization expires. I can hunt this down on my insurance website, or when you first get that approval, there will be an authorized until date. Mine is sometime in July. So I have a reminder 1 to 2 months ahead of time to proactively contact my doctor to start the process ahead of time. That way, if there is any insurance shenanigans, I have some time to go through those channels and be persistent to get the approval that I need. Lastly, before questions, in my case, my medication is refrigerated. I consider that my most valuable possession in case of emergency. So I have extra ice packs and shipment boxes on hand. So if the power goes out, keeping that cold is my first priority. So if I had an extended power outage, I already have some of those ice packs that come with the medication that are stored away in my back of my fridge that I could go put that in the box to get to refrigeration, hopefully somewhere else soon. That was a lot of info. I don't expect you to remember it all, but hopefully there are at least one or two little nuggets that can save you some time. I'm going to put that link in the chat and we'll work through. I know we've got some questions there, but this URL, I've got all of these slides. So I know I went through that pretty quickly, but if you want to read through that again, I intentionally wrote that out in a hopefully clear way. I also have medical template documents in a variety of formats in case you'd like to use any of those as well.
Well, thank you, Catherine. That was an awesome talk with a lot of great information. And I love the medical history that you used to take with you. That's like awesome, especially with traveling.
It has
And also
saved,
having med lists, like that just saves so much time. So
yeah,
great
saved me
idea.